Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Long. I graduated from the college in 1975 with a degree in physics. I'm also a member of the Physical Sciences Division Visiting Committee. On behalf of the club, University of Chicago Club Alumni Club, and on behalf of the university, I welcome all of you. I'm very pleased to see so many. These are great events, and they're wonderful opportunities to take a really nice dive into Chicago scholarship. As we all know, the University of Chicago is characterized by both being unique and uncommon. And sort of fittingly, the Capital Campaign, the University of Chicago campaign of inquiry and impact, can also be characterized as being unique and uncommon. And let me just give you a few examples of why that is so. First is the size of the campaign. $4.5 billion campaign is among the top 5 campaigns in the history of universities, higher education. Pretty amazing and very comparable to what our peers have been able to accomplish. Second is the scope of our goals. So in addition to the Capital Campaign itself, another goal that we have is to engage with 125,000 of our alumni. And this is unique in that although other universities have had engagement goals sort of as part of their campaign, we're the first to not only announce this as a goal, but also to measure it, as Chicago does with everything, measurement, as you all know. And it's really a remarkable effort, and we're making strong progress towards those goals. So we recently reached the milestone of $3 billion in our campaign, so it's tremendous. We've also engaged with 72,000 alumni so far, so once again, that's a great deal of accomplishment in a very short period of time. Now, this wouldn't be an event, a Chicago event anyway, without some statistics. So let's look at the numbers. Engaging with 125,000 alumni represents 70% of our alumni. Now, even more amazing to me is that 53% of our alumni have graduated since 1990. All right, so stop to think about that. That's quite a statistic. It tells you the class sizes have gotten larger since some of us have been there. More than 16,000 alumni either live and or work in California. More than 5,600 alumni live or work in the greater Los Angeles area. Of the Los Angeles area alumni population, the top 5 schools in terms of number of alumni represented are the college with 32%, Booth with 25%, the Social Sciences Division with 10%, Law School with 8%, and the Division of the Humanities with 6%. So, very broad spectrum and well represented from all of the schools. During the campaign from 2014 to 2019, our goal is to engage 3,100 alumni from the Los Angeles area. To date, we've reached about 1,670 alumni, about 54% of our goal, and 28% of the cumulative campaign engagement from the LA area has been from attending university events like this one. So you're all really a major factor and a major part of reaching our goals by attending events such as this one. There are other ways to engage with the university. You can, besides going to events, you can give, you can connect online. Joining the Alumni Club is another great way of engaging. And there are really significant benefits to participating in our club, including alumni recognition, for noteworthy achievements and strong support of the university gives alumni awards for service to the university through the Distinguished Alumni Awards, networking, meeting new people, making connections, enhancing relationships at alumni events throughout the year. career advancement through opportunities to meet some of our noteworthy alumni who can guide you on the right path at any point in your career. Volunteer opportunities to interact with alumni who hail from a very diverse backgrounds and preserve our community spirit and participate in the life of the university. These are all benefits for being part of the club. As a matter of fact, we're looking for individuals who'd like to serve on the board. We're accepting applications. You can go to our website at www.uchicagola.org and submit an application, and I encourage any of you that are interested to please do so. If you have questions after the talk, reach out to me. We've got several other alumni board members here. Mike, I think Harry is here, Maureen. Just talk to us. In fact, why don't you stand up so people can see? Mike, Maureen, where are you? Maureen, and Harry, where are you sitting? Right here. So talk to us, or even talk to Jen, our alumni staff representative. Well, thank you for being here, making the university one of the great centers of education, discovery, and impact. We're going to see a short video, 5-minute video about the campaign. Enjoy the afternoon. Thank you.
The University of Chicago is urban,
global, courageous,
unusual,
phenomenal,
rigorous,
fabulous,
outspoken,
economics and pizza,
pushing borders,
invigorating,
an intellectual crucible
that pushes you to be your best every day.
From its inception, the University of Chicago focused on rigorous, intense inquiry. It's defined everything about what the University of Chicago is today and what it will be in the future.
The core curriculum is the symbol of who we are. Our mission is to get very talented students and to put them through a program of systematic, interdisciplinary training, and 4 years later graduate Chicago intellectuals.
I'll bring up a discovery that we've made, then I'll proceed to criticize my own discovery. It's through self-criticism you create a learning culture of critical inquiry.
We aren't just talking at each other, we're listening. And at the end of the class, I may have a completely different perspective on the issue.
Some excellent students over the years. They were very much my teachers. It changed my work. It just exposed me to a world of ideas.
I was the beneficiary of a scholarship from the University of Chicago. I could not have gone to business school without that scholarship.
I just feel so grateful that I was selected to kind of be among the minds and the intelligence and the incredible people. It's been the best experience of my life.
I think supporting young people to pursue their dreams opens up the world to you. All we ask of anybody is that they do the same to the next generation.
The university is really made by the people in it.
really very competitive.
Very unruly.
Seeing all the crazy, amazing things that they're doing.
Curing diabetes, cancer.
Innovation, more entrepreneurship, new ventures, new technologies.
Really forces me to push for something beyond what I'm doing.
In higher education today, the humanities are really in retreat. We really think that it's a responsibility to continue to foster growth of the humanities. The Collegium will allow teams of humanists from all over the world to tackle problems that society needs to deal with.
The Institute of Molecular Engineering is organized around solving water, energy, health problems through designing matter from molecules up. Just solving one of all of these problems that we're working on would be tremendous.
You're part of an intellectual community
that attracts individuals who are intellectually fearless.
That will bring together experts from different disciplines to help solve problems. We're exploring opportunities to create more portals for the community and people in the city to come into the university and both get some of the knowledge that we have, but also share their knowledge with us.
Lots of people are skeptical about the ability to use social programs to prevent crime. What we've tried to do is to generate evidence that is so rigorous and so compelling that the most skeptical skeptic will have to acknowledge that there's really something here. 1 year of participation in the Youth Guidance and Becoming a Man program reduced violent crime arrests to these kids by over 40%, which I think really challenges the conventional wisdom that the only way that you can control crime and violence in the United States is through locking up millions and millions of people.
And if you show the impact It has global reach, billions of people, not just millions, billions of people that you can get to.
It's very important in a world which is becoming more integrated that you have these global universities.
We now have a rather more ambitious global strategy with the same gold standard quality of curriculum and teaching.
Students are going to want an experience of understanding other cultures because this is going to be the world that they are functioning in over the coming decades.
Can we bring people, scholars, politicians, administrators from these different areas also together to discuss what's going on?
To debate the big challenges facing the world.
Human illness limits society, and accordingly, fixing that, addressing it, is hugely important. It's transformative.
I had been diagnosed with metastatic or advanced breast cancer. The first thing Dr. Fumi Olopati said to me is, I want to find out more about your tumor so that I can personalize the treatment for both you and the tumor. The survival rate for metastatic diseases was 1 to 2 years. I really must say that I have survived the odds. I mean, I'm still sitting here, standing here 10 years plus.
You know what? It's worth every day getting up and supporting patients like her.
We have an enormous obligation to the people who gave us the opportunity today to do what we do with these young people, and in turn, they have an obligation to support those who come after us.
The question for us today is, how do we realize these values in a powerful way going forward?
Together, we are spreading grace and humanity.
Together we are thinking about ways in which you could have an impact on society.
Together,
We have the potential to change the way people think about urban problems.
Together,
we make amazing discoveries possible.
It's part of our DNA. It's who we are.
It's a big, big universe here.
Ours is the university of great discoveries.
Ours is the university of fearless inquiry.
Ours is the university that develops ideas that change the world.
My name is Mike Schlutz. I'm a graduate of the class of '66, and we have our reunion coming up shortly. And I'm very pleased to present this afternoon to you our speaker, Professor Laura Latinsky. Laura is a professor in the Department of Visual Arts at the university, where she's been since 1994. Her work has been exhibited nationally, for example, at the Getty here locally, at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago, and then internationally at the Photographers Gallery in London, and then at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Her honors include a Canada Council for the Arts, Kunstlerhaus Bethanian Residency, an Anonymous Was a Woman Award, and a John Simon Guggenheim Fellowship. She holds a BFA from the University of Manitoba and an MFA from Yale University School of Art. Laura?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me here today, and thank you for giving me your sunny Sunday, although I hear it's always sunny in California, although it's disproven the last 2 days. I came here and the person I was staying with was lamenting the fact that I had come all this way and it was like, so rainy and miserable. And then I showed him the picture that my husband had sent me of the 1.5 inches of snow that was on the ground and the frozen little daffodils that were kind of, leaning over, crippled in the ice. So thank you very much for coming. It's a real pleasure to be here and to speak about my work and about teaching and about photography. So today's talk, A Proposition or the Allure of Photography, is a propositional title. And I know it's slightly racy, but I thought that it was probably appropriate given the fact that photography is kind of a promiscuous medium. And what I mean by that is it's everywhere all the time and it's pervasive. You see photographs everywhere. We live in a visual world. And so it seemed really appropriate to sort of use that kind of flavor in the title. And also it's LA, so I thought, what the heck, So looking here at this image of what comes up when I put in the Google search term, photograph. In an era when, on average, 350 million photographs are uploaded daily to Facebook, and that's not including Instagram and Tumblr or all the other image sites that there are. What is a photograph? What could there possibly still be that needs to be photographed? Why do we continue to make them, and why do we continue to look at them? I'm going to try and sketch out a nexus of issues that photography embodies or explores, a kind of reduced history and theory of the medium, so as to introduce my work, but also to consider our ongoing use of in relation to the photograph in its potential to make meaning. Rather than giving you an artist's talk, that I would give you an overview of all of my work going back to those days in Manitoba, I'm going to focus on a project that I've been involved with over the last almost 2 decades now, and talk about this particular investigation, hoping to make evident the role of art making within our university that is a part of the production of knowledge. So again, I want to begin by asking, who here is a photographer? Anyone here a photographer? Okay, so I see, yeah, hands go up, right? So I could ask you, what kind of film to use, but of course that's a kind of a moot point now that everyone uses digital. I could say, well, what do you take pictures of? What are in your pictures? But really to the point, who is not a photographer here, given that this thing that we used to call a telephone, but we avoid at all costs making any phone calls on it. Instead, we use it for texting. Who doesn't have at least hundreds, if not thousands, of images taken on that phone or things that you could quickly look up, right? So who's not a photographer? So again, what is a picture? I see somebody's handing up. I want to ask the person over there why you're not a photographer, but I'll ask you later. So what is a picture? A moment, proof that we really ate that piece of gloriously adorned steak or dessert or whatever, food porn. Is the photograph the world as we really see it? Is it more than what we really see? Is it a means to jog memory or to hold on to experience in the past? Contemplation, beauty? Is a photograph an image, or is it an image of an object? Or is it an object in and of itself? And I'm going to propose that we start to answer this question by considering how we use photographs. And this idea parallels the literary theorist Judith Butler's work on gender and identity, which is beautifully nuanced and complex, but today I'm going to give you the really 3-second version. In her book, Bodies That Matter, she proposes that bodies, as matter, are clearly defined by a certain power of creation and rationality, so that to know the significance of something is to know how and why it matters, where to matter means it wants to materialize and to mean. The body's intelligibility is not a given, but it's produced. Butler identifies the production of this intelligible body at the site of performativity. How to understand matter as material and as value is not willful or arbitrary, but dependent upon its intelligibility as it is produced. Built upon Austin's perlocutionary and illocutionary force of the performative, the classic example being when a couple wants to get married and the man and the woman say, I do, and then they are married. There's a kind of transformative thing that happens through the utterance of the words I do. Butler's performativity works through normative, mainstream, and hegemonic relations. There is the practice of reiteration and of exclusion. Practice is the vital term here. Identity is how it is practiced or performed, that is how it is communicated. Language, commonly understood as the vehicle for communication, involves both iteration and exclusion. Parallel to this is what gets seen and what doesn't get seen. Bless you. And what makes one body matter differently than another? How do we understand identity, our very selves as individuals, as special and idiosyncratic in light of our role within a society that manufactures, or at the very least in cultures, this notion of self as different and special? And why do we consider the photograph the vehicle for conveying this entity? So those photographs we have of our family on vacation, this being one of them, how are they different from everyone else or anyone else's family picture? We all know what occasions demand the production of images: birthday parties, family vacations, the Mona Lisa, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your cat. But what is left out of those images? What is not pictured? Again, I refer to Butler's idea of identity as performative, neither purely nurture, that is fate, or nature, neither nature nor nurture. So either neither fate nor constructed. And this idea is critical in considering how we know what we know, how we read visually, and how the photograph operates within our world, reliant as it is on how it is used, who makes it, who does it looking, where it's seen, how it's seen. By relating the photograph as tantamount to language, with an understanding of language as a social construct, we can give understanding of how pictures, like words, are a medium, a vehicle for conveying meaning. They're not concrete, they're not true, they're not lying, not lies either, but they're dependent upon a set of contexts and usage for determining meaning. So I say the word apple. You guys picture an apple, maybe like that one on the, sorry, your left. Or maybe you think of American as apple pie, or anyone recognize this apple? And then there's the Garden of Eden, which is one of my favorites. There's an interesting parallel between this narrative and psychoanalytic theories of identity formation, including Lacan's mirror stage theory. Both involve a trauma through the emergence of subjectivity, that is, of recognizing and naming oneself as different from everything else, naming language, having language. I cannot be me until I recognize that I am separate from everything and everyone else. This trauma gets exercised, if not excised, through the rest of one's life as a desire to be whole, to return to the Garden of Eden, even as it is a place of ignorance, its bliss preferable to knowing and pain. This desire to return, also knowing that one can never go back, to achieve complete and everlasting satiation and fulfillment is theorized as impossible precisely because it doesn't really exist. It never did. It's memory bound in the present, a fantasy. Even while it is held in us as individuals, it's not an individual fantasy, rather it's the product of the social. It's a fantasy that's exercised as a striving, a yearning that, it may be argued, is at the maw of capitalism's frenzied circuitry of production and consumption. So too, the photograph speaks to this desire, both in its ubiquity, that no one image ever completes, ever fulfills, ever gives you what it promises. What the photograph portends is always held just out of reach. That was the perfect family back in that family photograph. Or this car advertisement that doesn't have a car in it, but it's for Aston Martin. Or the art of somebody like Andreas Gursky. This is Rhine 2 from 1999, that sold record value for a photograph for $4.3 million a few years ago. It's a 3-meter wide image of the Rhine River. But the image is actually a composite. It's a combination of several exposures and a lot of digital intervention. One might think of this as a paradox, that this depiction of the Rhine could not be obtained in situ. Rather, it's a fictional construction that's required to provide an accurate image. So this photograph fulfills an idea or an ideal about what a river looks like. But it can only be realized through skilled technological manipulation so as to make it look real. Realer than real? What is that? Like, what does a photograph give us? A Google search for the same image. And I have to diverge just momentarily here to point out that our apprehension of images is primarily on screens, digital ones like this one, reproduced temporary apparitions dependent upon technological specifics of screen and image resolution, monitor conditions, and so on. On the screen, the dematerialized image is removed somewhat from the original. Yet, and this is really important for photography, what would the original be? Is it the photograph that Gursky made? Is it the Rhine River that's photographed? Or is it the idea of the Rhine? And from whence did this idea rise? In our age of rapidly transmitted digital reproduction, is it even possible to constitute an original, an origin, a site or a time where everything or something began? Thinking about the immediacy of image making as well as its dissemination, here's one of the more famous images from the Abu Ghraib prison that deservedly raised complex controversies about the ability of images to disturb on many, many levels. To paraphrase Gertrude Stein, is there a there? Or Baudrillard, a European awed by LA, who asserted that there's no relation whatsoever between the sign, the image, and what it points to. There's a dissolution. If on the one hand, in a period where everyone is a photographer and everything's been pictured, why more pictures? What's its ongoing allure? What do they reveal? And is it a revelation or is it a repetition? In 1844, Henry Fox Talbot. It's an image that was taken in, sorry, my brain, thank you. in Guantanamo. It was a set-up image. It's just a staged image that the guards staged, and the guards got into a whole bunch of trouble. There was a huge controversy about it. Yeah, I can answer more questions about that. In 1844, Henry Fox Talbot published The Pencil of Nature. It was the first book illustrated with photographs, 24 of them. He wrote, "The plates of the present work are impressed by the agency of light alone, without any aid whatever from the artist's pencil. They are sun pictures themselves and not, as some persons have imagined, engravings in imitation," which is odd because he actually photographed an engraving, because the issue was how to mechanically reproduce and disseminate images. We see nature. This is a leaf that is a photogram, in other words, a direct contact print where the leaf was laid on top of the photographic sensitive material that left an impression or a shadow of the leaf itself. And then there's the still life. Photographs, early photographs imitated paintings that preceded them. Visual precedents today inform my ideas about what should be pictured, what should be seen, and how to see them. And then there's this street scene, which is from 1884. It's a view of the boulevards in Paris. And there's no people, actually, I think it's not true. There's like one person in there that you can barely see. But people weren't visible, not because they weren't present, but because the light-sensitive technology was not sensitive enough to record movement. And so it only was able to record what was still, like the buildings and the trees. Or a statue of a human could be still enough to give a degree of verisimilitude. Until much later, as in here, in 1887, when Edward Muybridge, who was a renowned rapscallion and photographer, inventor, and had a very bad gambling habit, from what I heard, who, in order to prove a bet about whether a horse had all four legs off the ground at any one time, because paintings at this time were made like the one on your left, sort of like hobby horses, where the horse would rock between its front legs and its back legs. So Muybridge speeded up the technology so that he could capture the image of a horse running and prove, as in the images on the right, that a horse had their legs off the ground at different times and that they strided the way that they did. And he also used gunpowder as an early form of flash, which I'm sure made the horses run even faster. Today, photographic materials have improved such that on the left we see a high-resolution image that is recorded at the rate of 4.4 trillion per second, leading to the problem with the argument that the photograph shows us the world as it is, because even early on, Siegfried Kracauer wrestles with its truth value through the work of Karl Blossfeld's photographs, the image on the right, that depicted so much more than the eye could ever see. But more than this mechanical evidence of what the camera can show us, more than our eyes can see, what does the camera's sight privilege? Its monocular single point eye accords to a set of principles developed through the Renaissance, different in the South than in the North. This is a 1525 Albrecht Dürer draftsman making a perspective drawing of a woman, illustrating the principles of perspectival rendering. Do I need to mention the gender relationship of the seer and what's being looked at? Laura Mulvey's 1976 essay on narrative cinema and visual pleasure set forth an argument that's, again, radically simplified here, that the camera's gaze occupies resolutely a position of authority. Housed as it is within the social, the camera's gaze is ruled by hegemony such that the female is always positioned as object, subjected to and by the male. This power relationship, as a perpetuation of societal attitudes, is not proof, but rather like language through repetition, normalized. The more you read, hear, see X, the more it seems like, well, that's just the way it is. This is the way it's supposed to be. And I became really interested in how this position and this idea about seeing regarding voyeurism is mired in these negative connotations. And as a woman, female, and one who enjoys the visual, might there be a way to restructure this formulation with voyeurism denoted as the pleasure of looking? Why are we so beholden to its charms even while we make it a prohibition? Or is it the prohibition that makes it a pleasure? It's the frisson, if you will. You're not supposed to look, so therefore the looking is the pleasure. In Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper, a classic Renaissance one-point perspectival painting, its iteration asserts a rationality through its systemization of depiction. That is, its description is normalized through a kind of system that it employs. Now again, this is different in the South than in the North, where in the North, here's a Peter Clyce still life from 1643. In the North, different kinds of objects are described through the Renaissance period. Not only different kinds of objects, but the description itself is different. The hierarchy and relativity of the Southern perspectival description is here, as Svetlana Alpers argues, a democratic description with the expensive glass goblet painted as lovingly and precisely as the lowly bread that would have been available to everyone. Like the camera, there's no distinguishing of an object's value. Rather, everything is recorded equally. So why these differences in the North and in the South? Why the still life as a subject in this particular historical juncture? In what is really one of the very few books on still life that is, I think, more than just descriptive analysis, Simon Schama and Norman Bryson both write about the still life. And in Norman Bryson's Looking at the Overlooked, he examines the still life genre through 4 different historical junctures, as they are indicative of this arena of the home, of food as sustenance, need, and want, of the personal and the social, or how still life communicates about the culture that produces and values them. Now, in the late 1600s, the Dutch were involved in a campaign of imperialism, traveling the world, that resulted in a somewhat rapid acquisition of material wealth, unprecedented in their Puritan culture. Theirs was an early global, early mercantile, early capitalist culture, so that to resolve this unaccustomed splendor, they situated these objects as those of value, but more so their depiction as objects of value. So in other words, the paintings were a kind of processing or like digesting this wealth that they had. They are intended to be seen in the paintings and to be disseminated, to be spread around, so lots of people could see them, to the masses, as a kind of advertisement of one's status, but also as allegory. There is a need societally to teach others of what is to be wanted, and the stuff that's so tenderly described is one's due if you're a good person and you follow God's laws and you do work hard and follow Puritan edicts. So these paintings describe a pleasure in material objects and in the visual appreciation of them. There's also the subtext of the meager repast, the glass goblet combined with the common bread. Don't want too much because you might get punished. The paintings not only depict objects of a particular order, that of the ordinary creaturely comforts, as Bryson describes, but they're also a vehicle for instruction. There's a didacticism to them. What to value, how to see, how to think. And these conditions set up the need for photography. Less invention and more a satisfaction of a set of needs about how to describe the world. While Catholicism necessitated a retreat from the fundamentalist prohibition against animate depictions so as to make the lessons in the Bible evident to common folk, Protestants strive for a different rhetoric to be brought to the masses. Again, these 2 visual modalities make evident the need for photography. In their description, akin if not identical to how we see, the northern imagery distinct from the south as they articulate different ideologies, and vitally, that images are they can be widely spread, and they look sort of like how we see with our eyes. This leads into my work into the genre of still life, but just before I move into that, I want to show a couple of images that are a monograph that was printed by the University of Chicago Press that looked at love. This is from a collection of photographs called Venus Inferred, which is a play on a Sater-Masoch, Venus in Furs, if any of you remember that from your education. My interest in the personal is driven by what was a post-Enlightenment shift from religious love, as in the Mantegna painting that we looked at, to secular or romantic love. And that love is in constant tension between romantic ideals of the one and eternal satisfaction allying with previously religious verbiage, while at the same time, love is the stuff of pop songs and Hallmark greeting cards. How can love be just me and you when we hear Rihanna singing "Should Have Put a Ring on It"? Seems like it's speaking for you or for me. So there's this kind of dichotomy between the sort of specialness of love and yet how we're all enculturated to find the pop song to be speaking for us. And that idea of the idiosyncratic, the special, the one true one is often so, this photograph is often very upsetting to my undergraduates because they're very dismayed when they learn that it's a completely staged image with 2 actors that are hired and it's completely fabricated. But yet it seems to be so true. Again, truer than true, what does that mean? Just as Calvin Klein's promises from his perfume, I love the names of his perfumes, from obsession to eternity, to sheer obsession, to sheer beauty, to one, which advertises being yourself while wearing what all of your friends are wearing. It cannot possibly be met. Or the kiss, as in this 1994 Sharon Lockhart piece edition, exemplifies the kiss as learned, programmed behavior. Yet is this really so? I don't know. I mean, it's a real tension, I think, for me and for us. And so working on the series, this is the last photograph that I made in 1996, and thinking about the love story as a kind of uncompromised present, like the photograph. It's an impossible place to be except for in regret, hindsight, or in longing, desire, the future. In 1994, I shifted from what had been this looking at a kind of third-person narrative, looking at couples, to instead a first-person point of view with a still life with this table in front of you, a kind of cornucopia. It began when I was in Germany with my then partner who was on a DAD, and I didn't speak German, so I really felt like I had no language. I was just looking, like I couldn't talk to anyone. It was sort of like, you know, being a 2-year-old and trying to communicate with people. And I was besotted with the material culture of going to the markets. I cook a lot. I really loved the whole place. And I set out to figure out if the love story doesn't, you know, hold water for me, what was left? And the photograph's affiliation to what remains, the aftermath, rather than the cornucopia, is a particular fascination. And Roland Barthes writes about this in Camera Lucida, that it's always about the that has been. It's always about the past. It's always about kind of death. And so I began looking at the table or questioning home, thinking about home as a kind of ground zero. Home seems like, if I ask you what home is, everyone would be like, duh, like you all know what home is, like who needs to be told what home is? And yet if home were really such an innate entity, why is there so much media culture around home? Why, when you go to the magazine rack of a bookstore, are there a million magazines from Martha Stewart to Everyday Living to Real Simple to, you know, Elle Decor, all that stuff that tells you how home should be? Including, I always feel nervous saying this, but Modern Family, The Simpsons, and you know, no longer Bill Cosby, but you know, home is like something that we're all supposed to be, like we think we know what it is. And in photography, dealing with the plasticity of space, on the one hand, for somebody who doesn't maybe go through art school, the photograph seems like it describes the world just so, the way that it looks, and yet the recognition, working with this scene, recognizing the degree of control and manipulation and labor that's involved, not just in making these scenes, you know, these still lifes, but the labor that's involved in making home as ideology and as labor, and whose labor, not dissimilar from other questions of gender and power and imbalance. Morandi has been a real touchstone for me in this work. His paintings really dependent upon standing in front of them to see what they're like. And again, I always feel bad showing them as a projection from a reproduction, because they're very intense experiences to look at them in the flesh. And I'm doing them a real disservice by showing them here. But I think it's important to say that these paintings of vessels and stuff on a table are not about vessels and stuff on a table. They're about a psychological and material experience. They're about aesthetics. Aesthetics being your senses, a full, sort of more holistic taking in and understanding the world. So in his case, the painting is about painting, and in my case, the photographs are about photographs. They're about the ordinary made extraordinary through the transmission and transformation of photography. They're about creaturely conditions, about rot, about temporality. I want there to be a sense of smell or palpability of the objects that are in the photograph and of the photograph itself, for there to be, again, a kind of seductiveness to the image, while at the same time there's a kind of hesitation because of the sense of, in this case, the rotten, smelly cantaloupe. In 2006, I got a studio where I began working for the first time. And for me, the question arose again of what to make a photograph of. Because in a studio, what do you bring into the studio to make a picture of? If everything has been made, like if I take a picture of something beautiful, do I have a beautiful picture? If I take a picture of something ugly, do I have an ugly picture? If I take a picture of something expensive, do I have an expensive picture? What do you bring into that place? So I began to do this project where I was reading a book by Harry Matthews, who wrote a book called 20 Lines a Day when he had a writer's block, and he decided that he would set himself up in his writing studio, and after writing 20 lines that day, he was free to do whatever he wanted. He could go to the movies, he could go to the bar, he could read the New Yorker, he could do whatever. And I thought, okay, I'm gonna walk to my studio. It's about a 4-block walk. And whatever I see that captures my interest, I'm just gonna try and reserve judgment. And I ended up bringing, like stuff that people threw out mostly that I would find, or stuff that I brought from home, like this pink net that was wrapping Thai rice noodles. And thinking about the photograph as an object in and of itself rather than a picture of something. So again, this transformation that's performed by the photographic process that mediates observation, that mediates one perception, into this, an image that, like a short story or a critical text, suggests a set of conditions about looking and about the world. Using light for its psychological and emotional affect. While I worked on the last photograph, which is from the Dog and the Wolf series, I simultaneously worked on this. The Dog and the Wolf, I'll just flip back for a second. The Dog and the Wolf was in my home. I had just had a second child, and I felt really like I was stuck, like I couldn't go anywhere because I had this little baby and I had to be, at home. And I decided to try and use that because I think so much of making art is about using what you have around you. And there's a kind of heroism, I guess, of going and scaling mountains and finding famous people or famous things and then getting that photograph. But I was really interested in the idea of making do. How do you make something out of what you have? Given that that's all you have is what you have. So how do you make something out of that? And so I was sort of thinking about these as turning a silk purse into a sow, the other way around. A sow's purse into a sow's ear into a silk purse. That's what that is. So I was interested in this idea of taking nothing or taking the everyday and turning it into a photograph. And this series here, Fall, I was thinking about last meals as an abstract idea, the way of trying to communicate visually what taste would look like. So here, cherry. The white areas of the picture plane are synonymous with the white of the paper and with white walls, but it's never white. White is always sort of corrupted in my photographs. It's never pure. And I want these images to speak of their being made, not natural. So there's little bits of tape, there's fingerprints, there's crumbs, there's little stuff that you can't see in these projections. Another artist whose work has been, again, something I keep on going back to is Gertrude Stein, and the way that she uses language that operates both formally, denotatively, the words have meaning that you understand, and as sound, sonically. Where is the serene length? It is there, and a dark place is not a dark place. Only a white and red or black, only a yellow and green or blue. A pink is scarlet, a bow is every color. A line distinguishes it, a line just distinguishes it. So how meaning is parsed out, there's a kind of, I never really know what this means, but there's a kind of poeticism to it, the way that one word is affected by its relation to another word that really engages me in my work. And right around this time, I've moved through 15 years of photographs and very, very quickly. But I wanted to talk about my work here for the last little bit. I moved into this work that I call ill form and void full, making photographs out of print and digital media, trying to reconcile the want that pictures produce in us as viewers so as to respond to the kind of frenzied obsolescence that's so palpable in our present culture. Taking bits and pieces from an array of print and media sources is a way of thinking about structuring desire that's not predicated upon always wanting the thing that's in the picture, but instead the picture giving a kind of satisfaction, having the photograph and being sated by the photograph. As I've been doing this work, I use a large format camera, but I also rely upon occasionally the democracy of the scanner, the flatbed scanner. So these photographs are smaller and they're printed quite small, whereas most of the rest of my work is printed larger, so there's something in the photograph that's at a 1-to-1 scale. So there's a feeling, again, of proximity to the thing in the picture. There's a reckoning with that illusion of what it is you're looking at. But here I'm really interested in the democracy of the light and of the way that the scanner takes in all the information across the scanner bed in, again, a kind of true democratic way to kind of usurp ideas about hierarchy and privilege. Also thinking about light. In my photographs, a lot of them, really all of them, are quite meticulously put together. And again, you can't see here, but there's masking tape, there's little drips, there's smudges, things are bent. There's a kind of compulsiveness and then trying to let go, this in-betweenness that I'm interested in for the photographic moment. And then the light, I always work with natural light because I'm really interested in how natural light is like, I grew up Jewish, and my grandparents, during Passover, you'd leave a glass of wine out for Elijah just in case Elijah showed up. And so the light is sort of like my Elijah. Like I plan the photograph and I work on the photograph, and then I notice the light and I start to work with the light, and it's kind of like a tango partner because I'm in a studio. I've been in the studio for a long time, and I know where it's going to be over the course of a year, and I can track it and follow it and set up the photograph so that when it's at that place, I can use it. And then sometimes it just surprises me. And so there's this way of, again, working with what you have and trying to make something out of what you have. I deal a lot with that idea of iteration and withdrawal or removal, so positive and negative space. In painting and in drawing and in art making in general, or in editing a text, the idea of editing, of taking something out or excising it so as to refine and to hone is very common, whereas with the photograph it's always thought of like as an encapsulation, like you take the picture and then you have whatever's in front of you and there's no process of removal. Whereas I'm really interested in the taking out to talk about, again, what is not seen or what is removed or what is withheld. And so in the photograph, you can see there's areas that are cut out, and you can recognize that they're the shape of a spoon or they're the shape of a plate, but you don't get the thing. But you know it's there. You don't need the thing to be there. And as the work has progressed, it's become increasingly more abstract as I am interested in this quality of the photograph and this in-betweenness. And again, the light and forming these are, sometimes people talk about them as being collages or photographs of collages, but they really aren't collages in a kind of classic sense. But I am really interested now, there's a kind of zeitgeist in the art world where many, many artists are doing collage that seems very similar to what was happening in the 20s and 30s, which was also a time of great social upheaval. And I think that turning to collage is a way of reckoning with social upheaval and a real diaspora of different kinds of opinions and voices and sources and materials, a way of trying to digest all of that. The reference to the table also refers to the horizon line of landscape. And as this is the last photograph that I'm going to show, and then I'm going to open it up to questions. As I've worked with these pictures, I've also, in addition to the Martha Stewart and the Elle Decor and the home and kitchen references, I've also increasingly incorporated art and fashion. And this is, I think it's from a real simple vase, and then there's a Matisse vine from a Matisse painting and a little Gerhard Richter flower from a portrait of Betty. And my thinking about art is that art is a consumable object. We like to think that art is somehow removed from commerce, but if anyone's been to an art fair, you know it's not. And they sell at galleries. It's something that you buy. It's a different store than going to Macy's, but it's a store nonetheless, an art gallery. And so I'm really interested in trying to also reckon with that. Not that I'm going to cure capitalism or would even try and think about it, because I think that we're thoroughly, I mean, that's the system we're in, is we're in a consumer culture. But it's a way of trying to rethink, like, okay, what do we have? What do we have, and what do we make out of what we have? How do we reconcile ourselves? And for me, it's a way of being okay in the world, and even being maybe celebratory about being okay in the world. And I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to ask you to ask me questions. Okay.
Hi, if you could wait until we get the microphone so that we are recording, so we make sure we get your voice.
Thank you. I'm not, first of all, a photographer. I loved your ideas of the do the best you can. Not that you do the best you can. Whatever is around me, I get inspired, and I take photos, and I enjoy it. My question to you is, one thing, do you have any preference or thoughts about photography by digital or by film? That's one thing. The second thing I would like to know that with the editing in the world of Lightroom and what have you around us, how is your feeling if somebody did something and enjoys editing and doing things to a photo? Is this make us a less photographer, or affects your pride, or what? How is your feeling about editing and doing things that is not necessarily on your picture, you add it?
Photographs have always been manipulated. I mean, there was a movement with the F-64 group back in the earlier days of photography, the 30s, 40s, and 50s, where to prove that photography was art, artists created a kind of manifesto that the artists had to be able to pre-visualize what they were going to photograph and then frame the picture in a certain way and expose the film in a certain way. Ansel Adams, Edward Weston were proponents of this idea. But it was to counteract the claim that photography was a purely mechanical process. But nonetheless, photography has always involved manipulation, including Edward Weston and Ansel Adams. In other words, reshaping, controlling one's tools. So I don't think that digital is any more or less wrong or right. The issue of whether one is a photographer, photography has changed as a medium. It's, there was a great deal of, wringing of hands and concern about how photography was going to eradicate painting. No one would paint anymore once photography came, into the helm and became commonly used. But it just doesn't happen, because photography and painting are different media. And I think similarly, digital technology avails different possibilities. And so it's a different media making, you see these different like kind of pendulums or furrows. So Andreas Gursky's work and a lot of artists around the late 90s were really using digital technology in this very sophisticated way that the art market was very infatuated with. And now the art market has kind of done a bit of a 180, and the hand, when you see the artist's hand, and the artist made their own print in the darkroom, and there's a sort of like resurgence of that idea of making something by hand that is also a kind of romanticism that Martha Stewart, I mean, has anyone ever made a successful Martha Stewart project? I mean, you really need a team of professionals to do any of those projects, because they're really specialized activities. And I've tried, I'll be like, oh, I'll make some cookies with my kids, and they turn out, I love them, but they don't turn out anything like, what that looks like. So I think photography and editing, I mean, it's one of the tools. And so to use it is no more or less wrong than if you're painting, you're going to use different size brushes, and you're going to use paints, and you're going to, it's just one of the tools. Anybody else?
Hi, thank you. I am really interested in the fact that, 20 years ago, photos only existed as physical objects. You had to have a print or a slide or a negative or a poster, and now they aren't physical objects. And in fact, I get sort of panicky around that I can look up, I can Google Big Ben, and there's millions of images. And I'm interested in how maybe that has changed people's relationship to images, because it seems like there's also still that drive, like, I want my photo of Big Ben to prove that I was in London, even though there may be thousands that are better. And just sort of how it's changed from an object to piece of information that just floats out there that we save on our hard drives.
Right. I think there's so many interesting questions about, again, this idea of repetition, like what differentiates your photograph from Big Ben than all the other hundreds and thousands and millions of photographs of Big Ben, but still one feels compelled to make them, myself included. I mean, I take, vacation pictures and pictures of my kids and stuff. Although I have to admit, I'm not a family photographer. I don't know. I remember reading Susan Sontag, who wrote her book on photography back in the 70s, and so much of what she said was prescient in terms of how we make photographs. She talks about the kind of, ideas about labor and how we feel guilty taking vacations, and so we always have to be making photographs so that we feel like we're working, and that the photograph kind of is a stand-in for an experience. And it's a kind of evidence of something, like, once you take a picture of Big Ben, you can kind of like, look, I did that. Don't need to do that anymore. What interests me, given that I'm like, middle-aged, and so I'm not like at the, my kids who are using images in a different kind of way, or my students that use images in a different kind of way, is how we think that we know something because we've seen a picture of it, and yet how different an actual encounter is. Everything from a kiss to seeing a piece of artwork. I remember when I was young and growing up in Winnipeg, I took art history classes in college, and seeing Mondrian's paintings, I thought they were very hard-edged, clean, crisp kinds of things. And then I went to Minneapolis on a field trip, and I was horrified. I stood in front of Mondrian, who I thought I liked, and I was like, this is a grubby little ugly painting. You can see the brush strokes, and it's not even white, and it's like not blue. And then I sort of had this revelation. I was like, right, because it is a painting. It's not a badly reproduced slide that, of course, is colored over time because it's Ectacolor, and they used to the dyes are very unstable. But I also had that experience looking at Gerhard Richter. I mean, I was sort of interested in his work, but I didn't really get it. And then I saw an exhibition, and I was like, oh, right, this is about this kind of technology. And I feel like, I have this is my own little pet peeve, but I think often that work that looks really fantastic on the screen is, for me, sometimes often disappointing when I see it in person. Whereas when, I can't tell, I can only get a sense of what it looks like that might be the instigation to go and see something in person, but I have to read about it and get a kind of fuller sense of what the thing is. And I think it's really important. I make my photographs so that they are very materially present. I print on a beautiful watercolor kind of paper, and there's no glazing in front of the image, so that there is this kind of it makes your saliva glands, I hope, makes your saliva glands kind of start, juicing up because they're so yummy to look at. But I want there to be that kind of sensation, that sensorial thing. And I've had people say to me that they never liked my work when they saw it on a screen because it always looked so clean and clinical, and they thought it was really like Martha Stewart-y, kind of just very designy, kind of nice, but not, interesting. And then when they see it in the person, they're like, oh, I get it, because it's a really different thing to see something in person. Again, it's like seeing a picture of a person and then meeting them. It's just a whole different thing. So I emphasize in teaching that it's really important to experience the world, art, objects, to get out there and to see things. You cannot learn just by sitting at your computer. You can get an idea about some things and you can follow up on research, but this thing doesn't give you head, body, smell, taste, touch, all that stuff. And I just think it's one of the things that I'm very cautious about, the way that it operates in our society. Yes, and then.
Okay, 1 second. Let me get you the microphone.
One of the things that I'm always curious about when I see art is how the artist frames it and displays it, covers it with glass, not with glass, all of those issues. And in speaking to some artists, they'll say, oh, I don't care, if you purchase something, however you want to display it, which always kind of shocks me because I think, I want to do it the way you want to do it. Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit about how you present your art physically?
Sure. That's a great question. I think, again, the photograph is often thought of as an image. So people are like, well, I'd like one in 11 by 14 and I want one in 16 by 20. And it's like, no. Like these are meant to be at a certain size, at a certain scale. So I print them, as I mentioned, so that they're about the size of the thing that is in the picture. So there is this sense of a one-to-one kind of relation. And that question arose again in the 90s with digital technology when you could make anything any size. You could blow it up so it was billboard size. And what is the difference when you encounter something that's a scale of a billboard versus the kind of intimacy of something that's very small? And I decided that it was imperative that you encounter this thing and it kind of flirt with that idea of being real while at the same time not being real. And as I shifted from, I'm just going to go back quickly. As I shifted from this earlier work and some of the earlier still lifes like this one into the more recent work, because I'm culling from various sources, there's not a there's not like one thing that is the right scale. So rather I have to print the work and see what it looks like and figure out what scale feels right. And it drives my gallerists crazy because they have to frame pieces individually rather than having like all 30 by 40. But as a painter, if you were a painter, you wouldn't determine the size of your paintings based upon Kodak's size or Epson size of paper that's available. You'd make a painting the size that you want it. And so it's always sort of interesting to me that as photographers, like I grew up, you'd make an 8 by 10, 11 by 14, 16 by 20, I'm trying to remember all the sizes, 20 by 30, and there were these set sizes that had been determined as the size of the paper, but yet, and same with film. I mean, film has been standardized. Now, of course, we don't have film, but was still standardized for a certain kind of format. And so that interests me, that tension interests me. And then in doing this work, I decided to print it on Hahnemühle paper, again, to refer to the fact that it comes from print technology, so that I'm taking magazines that are printed as inkjet prints that aren't the old chemical dye process, but I am taking from print materials and also from digital technology. Although when I did this work, I've printed these the same size as the Epson flatbed scanner and on glossy chemical prints because I'm really interested in the kind of cycle of digital and analog technology, so that these are these little really glossy, they're kind of like greasy, but they're also really beautiful little images. Which again is different than this, where the fork would be the thing that is about the size of a real fork. And you'd get the sense of kind of, is it a window? Are you looking out? Are you looking in? Is it a horizontal surface? Is it a vertical? So the sense of spatial ambiguity speaking to an emotional and psychological ambiguity. And so it's really important for me to have the images at a particular size and also again to not have the glazing so that you can see the material. And also it's digital technology. And so yes, if the print gets damaged, it would cost a couple $100s to print it and then to reframe it. But it's, we don't live in an age now where this cannot be reproduced. As long as there's electricity and printing inks, so far we can print it again. It scares me if there's no electricity.
All right, we're at last question. We can definitely entertain questions in the reception after closing remarks, but we are at last question.
Yes, after you get the microphone, you have to wait. Over here.
Hi, you talked about art as commerce, but how do you think differently, if at all, about art that's for the sake of commerce as an academic and artist? Do you look at it differently, or do you let yourself be more of a consumer? Are there any certain brands that you think do it really well?
I'm really interested in how advertising works. I mean, again, advertising shows us who we want to be and how we want to be. And I joke about the Calvin Klein commercials, but I think they're brilliant. And there's so many Coca-Cola. Looking over the years of Coca-Cola advertising, it's so smart. And I remember there was a series on. I get all my news on NPR and the New Yorker and New York Times. But there was this great series on advertising and how it changed around when Mad Men first started, and how it used to be that the product would be featured as a way of trying to sell the product, but very quickly, advertisers realized that it wasn't about trying to sell the product, it was about trying to sell the lifestyle that you would have when you had the product. And so the product kind of took a back seat to whatever the message was of the great, if you get these underwear, man, you are going to be so hot, and there's going to be so many people looking at you. So that really interests me, thinking about how, again, photographs work and serve a certain purpose about what it is we like, and going through different, again, kind of pendulums about what's in fashion, or how bodies are thought of, and thinking, I learned in Europe now there's certain countries that have made it prohibitive for models to be under a certain weight because they want to discourage anorexia and really very negative body image among women who are adult women who shouldn't be below a certain body mass index. And so, thinking about how that's going to affect then fashion photography, which has so far, been serves a certain set of ideals. And so thinking about, my experience in life as compared to how advertising operates is really, I think, a very fascinating area, given that I am a photographer. And I occasionally do work and do some commercial jobs. And I actually really love doing commercial work because there's something quite blatant and matter-of-fact about what is being done with that work that I really enjoy and really take pleasure in. And I've had a really great time because the people that hire me because they like my work, and so they want me to do what I do. Although it was funny, when I did work for Martha Stewart, the people said, do what you do exactly like you do it, just make it a little cleaner. I was like, okay, I'll do that. So, but it's a real respectful, I do really love advertising and think it's an incredibly ingenious and important area of photographic and visual imaging. I think that was the last question, so you'll have to ask me anything else later. Thank you.
Okay. First, I'd like to extend thanks to Mike for the introduction and Laura for a really fascinating talk. And I invite each of you to continue the conversation for the reception afterwards here, and also have a wonderful evening. Finally, earlier I mentioned our 125,000 engagement goal. And just by being here this afternoon, all of you have helped us meet that goal. You are our best ambassadors. You are the key to helping grow the university community, the alumni network, simply by bringing yourself and one or more family or friends to these events. Your attendance counts, so please keep it up. And as a reminder, if any of you want to get involved locally, please talk with myself, with Mike, Harry, Maureen, any of us here, or Jen. We certainly welcome your continued participation in our events here. Thanks again. Have a wonderful evening.